Hello and welcome to CourtGames, a Legend of the Five Rings podcast, funded by the Legend of the Five Rings Discord Patreon.
This podcast will focus on the role-playing game stories and lore for Legend of the Five Rings.
I'm Korva.
And I'm Kakita Kaori, and we have a special guest today. I'd like to introduce Evan Dicken, who is the author of the new book coming out from Aconyte Press, To Chart the Clouds. Hello, Evan.
Hello. How are you both doing today?
We're doing great this morning.
Doing well, yeah.
Glad to hear it.
So, this book is coming out Q1 of 2022?
That's the plan. Yeah.
That's the plan.
Yeah, we'll see.
As with all things in these turbulent times.
I'll believe it when I have it in my grubby little hands. But yeah, I'm excited.
We've really enjoyed the Aconyte series. And I've read a preview copy of it. Have you, Korva?
Yep.
Wow.
But our audience hasn't. So to begin with, and without giving any spoilers, could you just tell us a little bit about your new book, To Chart the Clouds, and what it is about?
Yeah. It's about a secret valley that two clans want very much. Well, a valley that two clans want very much. I have to start from sort of the beginning. It's about a court noble, an imperial noble, Isami, and she is sort of a minor court noble, and who is hardworking yet sort of underappreciated in her job at the Ministry of Cartography, and wants nothing more than to be an imperial cartographer. And but she's been sort of sheltered in her upbringing, so she has a little bit a lot to learn, and she sort of runs afoul of various court machinations and clan machinations, and finds herself sort of over her head. And it's just about her trying to navigate this and to follow both her goal, which is to regain her status and to find and to become a court cartographer, and then also to sort of fix the mess that she inadvertently causes. And that's just sort of without giving any spoilers or anything away.
No, that's right. We don't want spoilers. We want everyone to go and read it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's that book. So let's get a little background on yourself. So can you give us a bit of how you became a writer to begin with?
Oh, yeah. Well, how I became a writer, I just have always been, as long as I can remember, writing little things and stuff like that. So I started, my partner actually got me to start submitting stuff decades ago. And, I sort of struggled in silence for a while, as most writers do, and then finally found my voice and found my place. But I was I write mostly horror and fantasy and some sci-fi, but mostly horror and fantasy. And so I found myself sort of gravitating, because I had read all the clan war books back when I was a kid, and all that sort of stuff. And I played some L5R back in the day. So I started writing for actually Black Library, maybe 5 years ago. Just sort of responded to a beautiful editor there, Charlotte Llewellyn-Wells, who is now actually with Aconyte Press. So she was one of the reasons I came over to L5R. But I've always sort of gravitated towards L5R. I haven't really had the chance to play much of it, although I own all the books of like three different games of it. I've never played the card game, but mostly the RPG. I've read through all of them a lot, and I think that I've always been I'm pursuing my PhD in Japanese history, so I've always been sort of geared towards that sort of thing, and focused on cartography, which is why the book itself is about that sort of thing. So I thought it was fun, and Lottie thought it was a great idea to sort of work my background in. So it was a lot of fun to bring in sort of historical elements like that. And that's sort of how I've become a writer, and I've just sort of plugged away at it. And, it's not, it'd be great if that was my primary mode of income, but unfortunately I also have a day job, so I can just sort of do this in my spare time. So solidly semi-pro writer, I consider myself.
Fair enough. What are the things you find most appealing about the world for Legend of the Five Rings?
Well, of course, the sort of Sengoku, like late Sengoku, early Tokugawa period politics of the place. I like the seven great clans, and how their sort of nested levels of interclan politicking, and then also the Imperial Court above that, and then several other smaller courts. And, I think that especially as it's sort of the setting sort of divested itself of, sort of problematic aspects in earlier editions, I think it's really sort of come into its own recently, which I really enjoy. And I think they're doing a great job of trying to, make it more accessible to people while also being sort of less, I'm trying to think of the word, sort of less, just racist a little bit, sort of in previous editions where, the focus on like seppuku and things like that. And I mean, it was that those sort of things did, of course, happen in Japanese history, but, a bunch of white people sitting around a gaming table pretending to be, samurai talking about honor is just, I could see how that could turn off a lot of Asian players and people that that sort of thing. So I think that the new edition itself has done a great job of fixing all those sort of less than stellar aspects of the game. And I think that it really lets the things I enjoy shine through, which is just sort of, getting to live and to inhabit, samurai and nobles and ninja and, ritualists and things like that. And it's just fun to play that sort of thing and to live in that world. And I've always been interested in that world. So I guess that is what has attracted me to L5R.
So the story features Imperials, because that's obviously our main character, as you said, but there's also the two clans that are interested in this valley. I don't think I'm giving too much weight if I specify that it's the lion and the scorpion.
No, I think you can get that from the cover.
Right.
Do you have a favorite clan or clans or another aspect, another group in Edge of the Five Rings? It's your favorite?
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely love the Crane, of course. They've always been my
What?
Yeah, darkly textured political drama has always been my bag. So the Crane have always been my favorite. If I could play an arrogant noble, I will at a heartbeat. I would have loved to write a Crane novel, but Josh Reynolds already did such a great job with the Doji Shin stuff that I really, there's no room for anybody else to do. I mean, I couldn't beat him, so there's no point in doing another Crane novel.
Fair enough.
And so, Lottie wanted to focus on, my editor mentioned sort of that there hadn't really been a Scorpion Lion sort of thing with multiple clans. So, and I mean, the Scorpion have always been a fun clan. I think that the sort of, balance between serving the Empire and serving themselves. And I think they're just a little bit more open about it than the other clans. And the Lion, I really enjoyed basically the sort of do as I say, not do as I do aspect of them, where, I mean, the Lion can be just as, underhanded as anyone else. They just, they've got this sort of veneer of nobility. And I mean, they sort of buy into their own hype a bit.
As they all do, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it was just fun to sort of play, the Lion off of the Scorpion, especially when I try to play against type with characters within the clans themselves. So my hope was to write a Lion character who was recognizably Lion, but also just sort of different enough that you could see the person coming through the sort of clan rhetoric. And the same with the Scorpion, somebody who has sort of bought into the Scorpions, their modus operandi, but at the same time wasn't really keen on doing the things that needed to be done. So it's I think that it was fun to sort of play them off each other like that.
So your books in general have been, I've seen the horror ones the most in your titles, but you definitely didn't go that track with To Chart the Clouds. It's very much political and adventure, but political. How is that taking this different path? What do you do in your writing that tries to bring that out to the front?
Well, I don't try to spook the characters. That's like the first.
No jump scares.
Yeah, no jump scares. There are sort of I feel like one of horror's strength as a subgenre is characterization. So focusing on people. And because, if you don't care about someone, you don't care if they're, terrified. You don't care if they're hurt, that sort of thing. So I think taking that from my horror, or at least whether I succeeded or not is up to the readers, obviously, but trying to give you characters that you worry about when they're put in situations of danger, and trying to give characters that are more than just one-dimensional. And I think that from the horror aspect, and I do write a bit of fantasy, not so much novels. Unfortunately, I haven't really. Well, actually, I mean, this one, obviously, but yeah. So mostly, I've been prior to this short fiction, and I have done some fantasy short fiction at like Beneath Ceaseless Skies or Heroic Fantasy Quarterly and things like that. But and so I've sort of enjoyed. I brought in those sort of sweeping aspects too. But it's very different writing in a IP than writing in your own headspace, where you've got a lot of. I mean, I have with Black Library, but like having a story Bible is still a very new experience to me. Things that, and having to pass your ideas through, several layers of, the game designers, your editor, that sort of thing, and to get them sort of signed off on. And in Aconyte and Lottie's defense, they've been incredibly good about giving me space to sort of stretch my wings, so to speak, within the setting, and while simultaneously sort of reining in my more wild imaginings. So I'm consistently impressed by how good they are at, because I've had editors before that were more micromanaging, and that's just not the case. They're incredibly good to work with.
So working for Aconyte in general, yeah, what is that like?
Wonderful, I would say. I'm kind of cheating because Lottie, Charlotte Llewellyn Wells, was basically my favorite editor at Black Library, and she and I wrote The Red Hours, which was one of the best things I've ever written. It was a little novella we did, I think, back in 2018. And when she went over to Aconyte, and they were asking for, author submissions, I sort of had a leg up, I think, because I think we both enjoyed working together, and I think she liked what I put down, and I really very much like her editing style and how she works. So, and in addition to that, everyone I've crossed paths with at Aconyte has been incredibly helpful, incredibly, conscientious, and they pay on time, which is great. Always a pleasure. And so they've been very, very professional, very great to work with. I have absolutely zero complaints about Aconyte.
I do find myself wondering, and I don't know whether this is a question you can actually answer, or whether it's one we want to keep in the interview. But you said they were reining in some of your wilder imaginings. Do you have a wilder imagining you could share?
With regards to Chart the Clouds?
Yeah.
If you can.
It was, I think the most back and forth we had, and this is a silly thing. The question was, does Rokugan have compasses? Or does it even have a magnetic north?
Well, because I have to say, there have been questions about what shape is the world of Rokugan. Like, it's never really been defined until very recently, when we discovered there are hemispheres and Rokugan is in the north one. So yeah, it's a genuine question. Is there a magnetic north? Do magnets work? Are there magnets?
Exactly. So I was we sort of sidestepped, and I don't think I'm giving any away, by sort of creating sort of a geomantic compass where it always points towards the emperor's palace, or where the emperor's seat of power is, or Otosanuchi, or that sort of thing. So I think that was that was partially my idea and partially Lottie's, and we just sort of like worked it out. And Katrina Ostrander over at Fantasy Flight was also a big help with that sort of thing, because she is just a sage of Rokugani lore. So she's always good to ask questions and to help, that sort of thing.
Is there anything you're nervous about when you're thinking about when this story is going to be released?
Oh yeah. I'm a bag of nerves. I'm like every author, I'm constantly worrying. I mean, I'm worried that it won't sell, but besides that, I think my biggest worry is that I got something wrong with regards to lore, or because there's just so much of it. And I've read through the books, several times in my life, various editions, and that's, I think, the problem, is that the backstories change, and they're sort of fluid. And I mean, you'll have that with an RPG based on a card game. So,
and different emphases in different games, in different editions, and I mean, the lore, as opposed, I mean, there's the background, and then there's the stuff that happened, which are kind of separate, and it could be difficult to tweeze out sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm worried that I will have messed something up, and that some eagle-eyed reader will be like, actually that didn't
That didn't happen.
Didn't happen quite that way, or and I we passed through several rounds of lore readings just to make sure that didn't happen, but I can always mess stuff up.
It sounds like it's almost more like historical fiction. It's like, I remember there's one novel series, and they got a bit castigated because they had a character go into Edo Castle, but they said, no, the main tower of Edo Castle burnt down the year before. It's stuff like that. Yeah. And you kind of get stuff like that with Rokugan. I'm sorry that character wasn't in Otosan Uchi on that year. They were off, doing this other thing, as described by the flavor text of this card. It's like,
Well, I'm the person who keeps all of those notes, so I didn't find anything. So there you go.
Your next PhD clearly needs to be Rokugani history.
Well, if I could, I would. Game studies or something I do.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book, so it was
very much so.
Good, so.
Well, that means an awful lot to hear. I mean, it's still incredibly surreal that I grew up reading these books, and then now I'm writing one, and I for the longest time I thought they were catfishing me. Like, who would want me to write this sort of thing, especially for Black Library or for Aconyte now? Like, it doesn't seem like, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it hasn't yet. So
I mean, I don't know if I quite want to put it this way, but it's kind of like the line between I'm an enthusiastic fan writing fan fiction and now I'm actually writing the thing. That must be surreal.
Very, very much. I like I said, I still can't believe that this is, I get to go home and, for research, read through an RPG book. Like, I'm used to reading through some like dry historical, piece, and here I get to go read about, the Claude, or I get to read about, the Crane or the Scorpion, and I just get to dig into their backstory, and that's research for me now. Like, it's something I get. Yeah, it's great. And before it was just for fun. I mean, it's still for fun. I still enjoy every moment of it. But yeah. And I am a researcher by trade, so it's really delightful for me to sort of dig into the nuts and bolts and to sort of compare editions and figure out where everything lies. And I think the new edition also does a good job of keeping everything vague enough that you can sort of build your own story in. I mean, especially with To Chart the Clouds, I tried to keep everything copacetic while simultaneously making room for changes. I think that bumping up against because we're sort of set in this nebulous timeline before the Scorpion coup, and we didn't want to give away too much because they've got a lot in the works, and I can't really speak to that. So I wanted to keep sort of something this is all happening off camera, and it plays into the larger political machinations that are going on within Rokugani court, but at the same time it isn't part of them, right? So the people we're dealing with are several levels down from the big movers and shakers in the setting, which is how I kept everything safe.
And also geographically, there's a certain amount of, well, it's clearly happening somewhere on this line because which clans are involved. But exactly where is not super. Yeah, you could set things there. You could set things slightly left to the right or the right of it, and
yeah, that was one of the funny things is they wanted to. I mean, I think they're going to put a map in the beginning because they've been really good. They have these beautiful maps that they put in. And being a map nerd, this is something that I was specifically, I don't know if I had enough juice to ask for, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited they put a map in. But they were asking like, okay, where does this take place? And I'm like, well, here are like 6 places like I circled on the map where it could take place. Like, I don't know where this actually fits in. But Rokugan, and that's another question I had is like, does Rokugan have Magnetic North? But how big is Rokugan? Like,
they have finally nailed that in this. They've given some numbers.
Yeah, it's 600 by 900.
Yeah,
I got map nerdy on it myself.
Yeah, it's approximately. It's not quite. If you imagine the archipelago of Japan, it's not quite the bounding box of that, but it's very close.
That is incredibly good to know. Thank you very much, because I'm getting out my notepad right now.
It's in the very beginning of the first book. They say that it's 600 miles wide by 900 miles north. So,
and I'm pretty sure that's been confirmed. At least one other. I'm pretty sure a character somewhere in one of the fictions has confirmed.
Well, thank you so much for that. This is very helpful, because a lot of the troubles I was running into is the editor would be like, well, how long does it take him to get there? And I'd be like, well, I have no idea how long, because I don't know how big the place is.
Speed of plot.
I'll send you a link after the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
You'll appreciate that. Yeah. That measures that.
Yeah.
Because I think that one of the troublesome things is the map shifts from edition to edition. Things aren't always in the same place. Yeah.
Oh, and it's not quite the same size. It's not quite the same shape. All sorts of weirdness.
And that's actually kind of funny, because, I mean, from the context of, mapping in non-Western cultures, like maps do shift, and even in Western cultures, but, Japanese maps, they're producing scientific cartography about the same time we are. But, back in the Sengoku period, a provincial map is going to look like not the same provincial map as somebody else's map, just because you're drawing it without, rule or line. So it makes sense that this sort of.
Yeah, and it's not even that. It's what. Why are they making this map? What is the map meant to convey? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people expect in the modern day, we are expecting like a 1-to-1, exact, precise, down, like satellite view. That's what we used to do in a map. But if you look at well, there are all sorts of different ways of doing maps. Like the London Underground is the one, and I think most metro systems, they're not exact. It's topological. What you need to know is I get on this station, get off of this station, and that's what they needed. I get on this road, and I don't go left, I don't go right. Now I go left, go over this bridge, and that's what they needed. And they didn't need this kind of exact. You could put a ruler on and say, okay, I'm going to be going exactly 47.2 miles. And so these maps look different, but they still worked. And it wasn't, I'd find all that fascinating.
Oh, yeah. No, I obviously do, too. I'm doing my doctorate in it. But, yeah, and I mean, one of the sort of genesis of the geomantic compass was that a lot of Japanese maps, at least from the period, the pre-modern period, east is actually at the top, rather than we're used to sitting north at the top, situating. But, yeah, they because it's pointing towards the Kyoto, yeah.
It's fascinating how confusing that is. And it's like, we're so used to north. And as soon as it's, wait, hang on. East is, what is going on here?
And also we're used to seeing all the text situated so you can read it from the bottom, from the map. But, the Japanese maps were meant to be laying on a floor and you walk around it. So all the text is facing each corner. So as you walk around the map, you can see, all the text on your side of the map is facing towards you. So it's fascinating stuff like that. But I didn't want to get too much in the weeds. That was one of the with the novel, of course, because nobody really needs to know that sort of that level of silliness.
Yeah.
So how long did this book actually take to write? Like, when did you start working on it?
Oh my gosh, I was on a very tight timeline. I think I've got my writing thing. Let me bring it up here. So I started. It took me about. I started on March 31st, 2021, and I ended on June 24th, 2021. So about a little less than 3 months, which was being, the first novel I've sat down and, written beginning to end. It was quite a jog. It was a lot of work.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I still can't believe I managed it.
So, did you have any specific Legend of the Five Rings inspirations for this particular novel?
Well, I think my favorite of the old Clan War novels, the Scorpion novel, I think was a lot of. I think it's still. I don't want to say it's the best, but it's definitely my favorite of the old Clan War novels, and of course, like taking inspiration, I guess, from history with regards to sort of Japanese court society and the Heian period, and also traveling up through the because Rokugan's at a very interesting intersection where you've got a strong court and also strong clans, which didn't really happen in history. So it's fun to sort of, dig into what that means, where, the emperor is still in charge, wherein, historically speaking, when the emperor was in charge, there were no samurai. And then when there were samurai, the emperor wasn't in charge.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there was a changeover, and there's also a period in the late Heian, where there was the northern Fujiwara, who were almost a completely separate nation, sort of ish. But that it is. It's not really a thing that occurs, and so that does make Rokugan kind of interesting sometimes.
Yeah. So it's very fun to see, to figure, to sort of think of how that would work, where you've got this imperial line and you've got these imperial families, the Otomo and the Miya and Seppun and things like that, and you've got these clans that are sort of working around, and so like half the court positions are imperial and half the court are like doji and bayushi and things like that, and you've got this increasingly strong scorpion contingent that are getting more power in court. So it's fun to see sort of how that trickles down with regards to how people on the ground and samurai and clan nobles are interacting. And that was interesting, because I think that one of the most fun sort of class things to play with was the fact that the main character Isami is she's a Miya, which is like one of the smallest imperial families, but technically she outranks everybody she talks to, even though in practice she's there basically by herself, and they have small armies with them. So it's fun to sort of tease at that tension between, technically you're my social superior, but in reality, if I wanted to disappear you, I could.
Yeah,
and there'd be almost no questions, because you're sort of on the outs.
It's one of those things. So long as no one ever finds out, but if anyone does, so there's some calculation going on.
Yeah,
right.
And I think that realization for her was a fun one to write.
You do have 3 pretty unique and interesting protagonists in this story, in particular Miya Isami. How would you describe her personality?
Well, I think hopefully it changes over the course of the novel, because, she begins as sort of an ingenue, where she's not innocent per se, but, she believes what everybody has told her with regards to, work hard, keep your chin up, you'll get ahead, sort of thing. And she's had sort of a sheltered upbringing with regards to, just how she interacts with the world, being both a noble, an imperial noble, and being just sort of part of this, bureaucracy. And when, the rubber meets the road, so to speak, when she actually starts to get involved in politicking, she finds herself very overmatched. But I think that from a person, her strengths are that she's good at her job, and, that she wants the best for everybody. And I feel like she tries to do the right thing. And hopefully that, she's not a one-dimensional character, and so that messes her plans up as much as it helps her. So I think that she begins the novel sort of trying to find her footing in this sort of, amidst the vicissitudes of court politics and clan politics, and almost getting killed several times. And then through that becomes somebody who's able to, at the end, know her place. And I don't mean that in a, pejorative. I mean, she knows what she wants and how to get it. And she's able to sort of throw shade with the best of them by the end of the novel. So she really comes into her own. At least I hope so. I hope that comes through. Okay, well, thank you.
So, of the 2 clans that you do, other than the Imperials, we also see the Lion Clan. So, what is your sense of the Lion Clan, and what do you feel is unique about them?
I feel like, obviously they consider themselves the most martial clan, and I think that I feel like, for me at least, the Lion Clan have always been super fun, because they're these sort of people who, we're the Imperial Army, we make up most of the fighting force of Rokugan. We're big enough that we could, if we marched on any other clan in earnest, we could probably crush them, excepting maybe the unicorn, I suppose. But it's just, it's fun to see sort of the tension between, the warrior tales that they're sort of raised on, and then how actually they go about their business when they're fighting. And I think that, there's been this sort of focus on Akoto's code and that sort of thing. But I mean, if you're using like the Legends of the Five or the five rings, or the Sun Tzu, you're like, it's good. It's good in practice, but in theory, I mean, it's good in theory, but in practice, like, you can't possibly summarize a bunch of, maxims and then apply them to the battlefield with absolute, certainty. So I think that when the Lion get out into the world, I think I sort of touched on the main character Miya Isami's innocence, but also the Lion getting out in the world and realizing that not everybody keeps their word. Not everybody, sort of follows a code. And if they do follow a code, it may be very different than yours. And, oh no, you're in a situation where, there might not be a saying for this. They're not, Akoto didn't talk about, how we're going to interact with, a scorpion who may not be a good faith actor, in this negotiation sort of thing. So, trying to apply that, and, I think all the minor characters, both the scorpion and the lion, were sheltered sort of in their own way. And I think that them all coming out of their shell together, and sort of painfully in a lot of places, really sort of puts it forward. And I think, at least regards to the lion character, Shinzo, he had this sort of idea that he would, the same as sort of Isami, where he'd work hard and he did a good job, and he would get a advantageous marriage, and he would be able to rise up through the clan through service. And I think that, in the working world, you're sort of told this thing as well, like, work hard and you'll rise. But in reality, like, that's not really how it happens. You've got to know people. You've got to, take advantage of opportunity when it arises and that sort of thing. And that not necessarily in a upright fashion. So I think that with regards to the lion, like, this tension between what they believe and how they act is probably the most interesting thing for me. And you can justify a lot of stuff under, the code. I mean, we see it every day with, biblical sayings and things like that, where people will twist, there's enough written that you can twist it to however you want to believe, to justify whatever you want to do with, I mean, the Crusades and whatnot, Deus Vult sort of stuff. But,
right. In war, all things are honorable.
Yeah. Winning is honorable, but yeah.
So in that same sense, what is really unique and interesting about the scorpion for you?
Oh, well, again, it's sort of this tension between the fact that their sort of motto, their sort of, the scorpion stinging the frog and whatnot, they see themselves as in a lot of ways more upright than a lot of other clans, because they're willing to accept the fact that they do wrong in service of the empire. And again, there's a lot of room in that belief for someone who genuinely does think that, I'm killing this court noble because, I'm doing this assassination because this guy was acting out of his out of place, and he would have caused a lot more problems. So by murdering him, poisoning him, I'm doing something fundamentally good for the empire. But again, who's to say? It's not like the emperor is sanctioning this assassination. It's not like, Hante himself is signing a paper that, gives you authority to do this sort of thing. So I think that, like, the fact that in doing so, in placing them and saying, anything I do is in service to the empire, no matter how underhanded, I think I'm doing the right thing. In putting themselves in that position, they've sort of circumvented, the Hantes themselves, and I think you see that come into full force, with the Scorpion coup in previous editions, and I don't really know exactly how it'll play out this time around. But I think it'll be fun to explore again, because again, that's my favorite. Like I said, political drama is my bag. So, and the Scorpion are right in the thick of it. So, and I enjoy seeing them sort of as a balance to the Crane too, where the Crane are just as underhanded as the Scorpion. They just go about it in a different way.
Yeah, they're underhand in an overhand kind of way.
Yeah. I mean, whereas the Scorpion will, sneak into your bedroom and drip some poison into your mouth while you sleep, the Crane will ruin your social, and get you exiled, or your social standing, get you exiled to some monastery in a mountain somewhere, and you're just as dead. You just get to wallow in it, I guess.
We also get to spend some time with the imperial bureaucracy, which I honestly don't think we have much in the past.
We haven't.
Which was no. So I that was an interesting place to be. So what inspired your take on the imperial families and how they react to each other?
Well, I mean, I read everything I could find on them, which again wasn't a lot, as you mentioned before. So I sort of drew on what I knew of Japanese courts, the Japanese court system, and especially during the Tokugawa period, where the courts are, technically in charge. Everybody says, we do this for the emperor, we do this for, such and such noble, and the nobles are still issuing edicts and things like that. But in reality, the shogun's in charge. So it's fun. And I guess even the Bakumatsu period towards the end, where, you've got these Satsuma and Choshu rebels who are fighting against the shogun, but they're doing it on behalf of the emperor. So I think that's sort of where I took my marching order, so to speak, with regards to the imperial bureaucracy, where you've got these imperial houses which are in charge. They do actually run things, but at the same time, they don't have the reach to administer every square hectare of Rokugan. So they've got to sort of defer to the clans to manage these places. And I think that having a bureaucracy where you have half to 3/4 of it are imperial, but also there's a small, a relatively sizable contingent of clan nobles who also have, court rank and whatnot, and they may have more actual practical power than the bureaucrats. Whereas, I'm such and such minister of such and such bureau, but in reality, I have to, anytime I want to get anything done, I have to wrangle with the clans to do it. Because they're the ones with most of the warriors, they're the ones with most of the bureaucrats, they're the ones with most of the peasants. So it's just it was fun to sort of dig into that and to see how they react to that, where they shouldn't, but they do have to defer to the clans in a lot of aspects, just to get things done.
I like that take. So you kind of mentioned it before, but should readers consider this story like canon, something that officially happened, part of the history of the world, at least for FFG, or this I guess is Asmodee, or Edge now, or is it mostly standalone, and could have happened or maybe not happened?
I'd like to say it's canon, but I'm not. I don't think the call is mine to make. I feel like I've kept it distant enough from the main storylines that it could easily have happened, especially because it doesn't. I mean, it does play into sort of rising Scorpion power and tensions between the clans and tensions between the court and the clans and the sort of growing weakness of the Hante. So I think that I'd like it to have happened, but again, that's not really my call to make.
Fair enough. That's true.
I kind of feel that the novels that have been coming out, they're sort of like, if you think about it, people's role-playing campaigns. The whole point of a role-playing game setting, unlike something like Lord of the Rings, where the setting exists really for one story, the whole point of Legend of the Five Rings is you can tell loads of different stories in loads of different places, and they can all fit in there somewhere, as long as they don't, break too much. I think the novels fill that kind of gap as well. There are different stories, but they can all take place because Rokugan's quite big, and there's room for them.
Okay. I think that's one of the beauties of the setting. I mean, it's a living setting, and it's still. I know it's changed through card game and clan politics and who won various tournaments. So what you get is a kind of, I don't want to say a kitchen sink setting, but a setting that changes quite rapidly, and has a lot of room for exposition in various places because there's so many interesting times in the history, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, speaking of history, I mean, you kind of touched on when this may have taken place. But when do you see this as taking place?
Well, I see it as I know that the RPG right now is sort of in that sort of like a nebulous time prior to the Scorpion coup. And I mean, again, I don't know how that will take place in this particular iteration of the game. So I like to say it's, in the decade or two leading up to, this coup, whatever form it takes, I think is where I would have put the novel.
Yeah, I have to say, when I tend to run those 2 times I get to run L5R, it's always kind of nebulously right before that, because that's what the setting kind of describes in the books. And so you can kind of, if you want to go that way, you can, but you can also just keep playing and indeed telling stories in that kind of nebulous, it hasn't quite happened yet, but it might do in the future, maybe,
I think that's a fun time because everybody's sort of gearing up for something, right? And everything's just on the verge of falling apart. And oh gosh, I feel like I just made myself sad thinking about general world politics. But I wouldn't want to live. I like writing about interesting times, but I do not like living in them.
Well, so can we expect any further adventures of Miya Isami and Co. or any other L5R stories from you?
Well, I can answer those all in various ways. I haven't been asked to write any more Isami stories, but the book hasn't come out yet, so I think it's a little premature for me to say. I left the ending, without giving anything away, a little bit open, where it could act as a standalone, but also there's room for more if it sells well and if people really take to it. But at the same time, I'm happy just leaving it as it is, because it's just I'm happy with where it ended up, and I think that the reader, hopefully at the end of the story, can imagine what happens after and what role Isami takes, and with regards to what she wants and what she gets. And I can say I am working on another novel, which I'm not really at liberty to talk about at the moment. So there will be, fingers crossed, unless something goes horribly wrong in the process, I will be writing something else, L5R, at least one more.
Good. Now, you've mentioned that you've written some other things out there. So for those people, listeners in the future who have managed to read the book and have come back to the podcast, or anyone who just wants to get a feel for your writing, what of your works would you recommend? Where should they go?
Oh, geez. Well, I guess since this is a fantasy novel, I would send them to probably Beneath Ceaseless Skies or Heroic Fantasy Quarterly. I have several they're long stories, maybe novelettes, so around 10,000 words, just on both of those sites, and they're both second world fantasy sites. And I don't think neither of them are really. Actually, I have written a couple historical fantasies for Cohesion Press out of Australia. They do sort of a military sci-fi fantasy sort of thing. So I have a couple stories in their anthologies, which are Japanese history, basically during the late Sengoku period with magic and demons and stuff. So I'd maybe direct you there.
All right. Okay. Well, sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on our show and talking about your book, To Chart the Clouds, again, coming out Q1 of 2022. If all is on track. We really appreciate you coming.
Oh, well, it's been a pleasure speaking with both of you. I really enjoy this. Sorry if I babbled on a little too much.
Oh, no,
that's great. That's what you're here for. Evan, where can people find you if they want to seek you out on the interwebs?
Oh, well, I do have a website. It is a bit old and dusty, but it's www.evandicken.com. I update the published list. So if you go to my work, I've got my Black Library page. I've got my sort of free page, and I guess I'll have to add a Aconyte L5R page too as well now. So I've made more work of myself.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you. We wanted to give a call out to Fortune and Strife, which is our affiliated actual play podcast, as well as our friends at D20 Radio. And also, we have shout outs to our Patreons. We wanted to give a shout out to Mackie to Maddie this week, for being our patron, and also for John or Ayuchi Noria, also called Nomadic. Thank you for being our Patreon and supporting us as we try doing this podcast.
Yep. Our content is funded by the Community Discord Patreon. And so it supports our editing costs as well as our website, CourtGamesPod.com, where you can see and store long-term information. We've got forums, we've got summaries of podcasts, RPG tools, and lots more. And for our patrons, we've got special bonus content, things like Adventure Seeds and early access to our actual play podcasts and more. Online, you can find us at our website, as stated, CourtGamesPod.com. You can also find us on Twitter at twitter.com/CourtGamesPod. And finally, our Patreon, if you would love to support us, you can find us at patreon.com/CourtGames.
This is Kikita Kaori. May the fortunes favor you.
And I have been Korvar, and until we meet again, keep your jade handy.
Correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com